if your intention is to, jail massive numbers of people, if you believe that, prison is an effective means of dealing with the myriad social needs of the African American community, then it's pretty effective. Now, I know no one would come out and say something like that. That sounds insane. But in fact, there's a long history in this country of dealing with problems in the African American community through criminal justice system, criminalizing social problems in a way that we don't do in other communities. I think our criminal justice system is working as intended. It is only broken to the extent that our society is broken.
For 400 plus years, we have experienced a broken system. It's no secret the criminal justice system hasn't worked for African American people. Local teacher John Brown explained how African Americans have been the target of wrongful convictions since 1620.
We have been since 1620. And, historically, African Americans have always been the target. They brought us over here on slave ships. They wanted to diminish, belittle, and control us. We had the Emancipation Proclamation signed in 1865. Free slaves were still being under control, being pushed down by Jim Crow. In 1960s, you see the Civil Rights Movement still being pressed down, still being persecuted doing whatever. Okay, the Civil Rights Bill gets passed. Lynchings, public lynchings slowly stopping, cross burners and all that stuff slowly stopping, but now you see this is just a different shades of homes.
He further explains, policing is a modern day form of slave patrolling.
Because people don't know this, the origins of police, originally a sheriff or anything that was in a small town was pretty much a slave patrol whenever during slavery. So if a slave escaped, they was only doing to go find him. That's what the police was originally for. And a lot of people don't know that because they don't do their research properly. And it wasn't until about 4 or 5 months ago I saw that. And I'm 25, so there's a lot of things out there, man. If we just slow down and read, and we can find out a whole lot more about that. But that was the original origins of like sheriffs in small towns, slave patrol and slave control, make sure they go back to their plantation. Same thing. When they got freed, they still run the street. Why do you think it's the black communities or black neighborhoods are always heavily policed all the time? You see the most, shootings, you see the most confrontations between police and black people in their neighborhoods.
Throughout the criminal justice system, we notice an alarming trend of wrongful convictions among African American people. Local correctional officer Christian Pitts explains why wrongful convictions are common.
Say lack of evidence, because I read that this one man in, I think it was Michigan, he served 40 years on a case that he wasn't even in the area when the crime happened.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he had a rental car and he was on the run. He tried to get them to see the rental agreement, but the police refused to view it. So they planted the charges on him, and like I said, lack of evidence to fully convict someone. I think that's a pretty big reason on wrongful conviction, because people give testimonies and such all the time, but the evidence is what truly locks somebody behind bars. Because if I go shoot somebody and they find a gun, evidence. If I go rob the store and they see my face, evidence. So
Mr. Pitts later stated his disposition on should police and prosecutors be held accountable for their part in wrongful conviction cases.
Yes, I do agree with that, because in terms of when someone goes through the criminal justice system, the first person that interacts with them in the system is going to be the police. And so the police ultimately decides how a person is going to go through the criminal justice system, because they are the ones that are going to find all the evidence, they're going to file the charges, and they're going to get the testimonies on what happened. And if they are not, truthful, or they don't put together enough evidence to fully convict someone, then that's where the problem starts.
Really good study shows that we'd have probably 20% less poverty in the United States if we weren't over-incarcerating at the rate that we are, because it has such an impact on people's future earnings when they get out of prison, has an impact on their children and their overall quality of life for their families. But in addition to all of that, it is disproportionately punishing minorities in this country as well. There's no difference between blacks and whites for using drugs or even dealing drugs. But African Americans are about almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for that.
When talking about the flawedness of the criminal justice system, it hits home. In 2005, my dad was arrested for possession of marijuana. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. During his time away, I could remember missing my father. The system robbed him an opportunity of being a part of my childhood. Luckily, he was released 10 years later and was able to attend my graduation from Jackson State University. Unfortunately, some people are not that lucky. It's so many people who have loved ones spending life in prison without parole or getting out over 30 or 40 years later.
I don't recall ever just thinking that, he may have. I don't ever remember really thinking. I've been asked that before. I've been asked that, when he got out. But I never recall thinking in my mind, because I supported him. Anybody that know me know that I supported him. I stuck by him, because my wife and I, we sent care packages every month, just like it was time, and I went and seen him faithfully every other month. I don't say no to that. I don't say no to that because.
On May 4th, 1979, Bobby Ray Dixon was charged with murder and rape of a woman. The only witness to this crime was the victim's 4-year-old son. Unfortunately, during the time of the trial, Mr. Dixon was coerced into giving a false statement of saying that he actually did the killing. Jerry Dixon, the brother of Bobby Ray Dixon, never doubted his brother's innocence. He stood by his side during the darkest times. Over 30 years later, Mr. Dixon gives credit to the Innocence Project for helping prove his brother's innocence.
With the Innocence Project, and then because he had cancer, he qualified for that early relief, and that's why he was able to get out. Actually before they started proceeding of the exoneration. Miss Emily Moss and Mr. Rob McDowell. Miss Emily, she was over the Innocence Project, a law firm down in New Orleans, but I said they did all that. But everything, that was asked us to do to support that, we did it, for, meeting downtown with questions or whatever, and I really can't answer that honestly, but no more than say that the Innocence Project, that they made sure. They took it over and they said what they were going to do, and they did what they said they were going to do.
Mr. Dixon later explained his brother's life after prison.
He asked to take a bath. I ain't took a bath in 32 years. Wow. He wanted to take a bath. And then he got in there, he in that prison like that, it doesn't like us. When we go sit into it, as long as we want to, use whatever, all these fragrances they got. He wasn't used to that, so. And he had a real, like a musky smell, like, one of them cats you can't just wash off. Mm-hmm. I knew my auntie, she lit up at Bassby at the time. She told me to go to get like some peroxide, run the tub of water and get the peroxide and then some kind of soap, which I use that body wash, and it made suds, and she said, just let him sit in there for a while. And he wanted to. I let him sit in there for like 15 minutes, then he's supposed to get out. And he begged me to let him stay another 5 minutes.
Mr. Dixon concluded by giving advice to people dealing with a wrongfully convicted family member.
Just try to be there for him. Be there for him as much as you can. And if you tell him you're going to do something, make sure you do it. Make sure that you can do it. All the things that I've done for him, I didn't do it based on if you do your part or she do her part. I did when I know I could do it.
Mr. Dixon said the criminal justice system has seen some progress, but there is much work to be done. Rashad Murray reporting.